People say a wedding is the happiest day in a father's life. But for me, it was the day my future son-in-law turned me into a laughingstock in front of hundreds of guests. He thought I was just an old school teacher, someone who could do nothing but suffer in silence. But he forgot I was once a soldier, and I know how to stand up after every fall. Before I reveal the whole truth behind that fall, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support is the reason I keep exposing the stories many would rather keep buried. The evening sun slanted across the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting golden light on the lush green lawn. A historic granite estate with its red-tiled roof and wide balcony stood proud, like a sentinel of Southern history. Today it was transformed into a wedding paradise, pink rose arches, white tablecloths, and crystal glasses sparkling in the sunlight. A string quartet played softly across the courtyard, blending with the gentle breeze. I, Patrick Holloway, walked between the rows of chairs, hand clasped tightly around my daughter Sophie's. She was a pure beam of light in her long wedding gown, her honey blonde hair flowing like silk. A lifetime of teaching mathematics, of writing equations across chalkboards, a lifetime of marching through Iraq, carrying brothers in arms through smoke and fire. Yet this moment, amid applause and the gaze of hundreds of guests, was the moment that made my heart tremble most, giving my daughter's hand to another man. "Dad," Sophie whispered under her veil, her voice trembling. "Thank you for everything." I dared not answer, afraid my throat would close if I spoke. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently, my silent message. "You will always be my greatest pride." We stopped beneath the floral arch. Julian Fairchild, the groom, took Sophie's hand. His tailored black tuxedo fit his tall frame, and a Patek Philippe watch glinted with a cold light. He bowed his head politely, lips curling in a smile I couldn't tell was courteous or smug. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly. Vows, music, confetti swirling in the breeze. When guests were invited into the outdoor banquet, I quietly drifted to table 15, the far end near the exit. No one had saved me a seat near the head table, where Sophie and Julian sat with bridesmaids and groomsmen. I took a deep breath, reminding myself it didn't matter. Years of teaching had trained me to accept being at the edge, overlooked. As long as my daughter was happy, I could endure the cold shoulder. A young waiter approached, pulling out my chair politely. I smiled, nodding thanks, and prepared to sit. But at that exact moment, Julian appeared, placing his hand on the back of the chair. "Allow me," he said, voice loud enough for nearby guests to notice. For a fleeting second I thought perhaps he meant to show kindness. I lowered myself, only for the chair to be yanked away. My body crashed onto the polished wooden floor, a loud thud echoing across the courtyard. Crystal glasses rattled. Some guests gasped, while others chuckled under their breath. I struggled to rise. Julian instantly extended his hand, face painted with false politeness. I hesitated, then accepted. He did pull me up, just enough to balance. But before I could steady myself, he let go suddenly, as if my touch was filth. I collapsed again, this time striking my head against the chair's edge. Lights blurred, and from somewhere distant, I heard Sophie's horrified cry. Laughter rippled louder across a few tables. Julian bent low, lips sweet, but eyes venomous. "Oh, forgive me, Mr. Holloway. Perhaps your hands were sweaty. But no harm done. The ground is comfortable enough, isn't it? For someone not used to Italian velvet chairs, maybe the floor suits better." He straightened, glancing around as if sharing a harmless joke, then lowering his voice just enough to carry. "Perhaps you'll feel most at ease close to the ground. That's where you belong." The air froze. Candle flames flickered cold. Some guests looked away, pretending to fuss with their appetizers. A few younger ones exchanged smirks, phones raised, lenses sneaking toward me. Sophie shot up from the head table, gown sweeping across the grass, her face pale. "Julian!" "My dad?" But he only shrugged, dismissing it as nothing. To him, it was a harmless prank. To me, it was a wound cut to the bone. Slowly, I pushed myself up, straightening the worn blue suit I'd once worn at Sophie's college graduation and kept for years. I forced a weak smile to ease my daughter's fear, but inside, fury burned hot. I had fallen in battlefields, blood soaking the sand, but never had I felt such humiliation as falling at my own daughter's wedding, under the mocking stares of strangers. And I knew this was no accident. It was a message, a public warning, a declaration that in his world I was nothing but an outsider. My fists clenched. If Julian thought an old school teacher knew nothing but chalk and numbers, he was gravely mistaken. Once a soldier, always a soldier, I had learned how to rise after every fall, and this time I would rise for my daughter. The confetti still danced in the breeze, but in my mind, older memories surged clear as yesterday. I remembered that autumn evening, Sophie knocking on my study door, holding white carnations, her mother's favorite. Her eyes sparkled, her voice filled with excitement. "Dad, I want you to meet someone. He's very special." I looked up from my stack of papers, my heart stumbling. I had taught hundreds of students, watched many young men grow, but hearing my daughter call someone special, that was the hardest test of a father's life. That night, Julian Fairchild stepped into my modest wooden home in Asheville. He wore a crisp white shirt without a wrinkle, expensive trousers, and hair slick like a magazine model. His Italian leather shoes clicked sharply against my old pine floor, the sound foreign in a house filled with books and family photos. He shook my hand, soft, perfumed, a grip too smooth, lacking weight. I was used to handshakes from teachers, veterans, neighbors, hands rough and honest. But his? Empty. At dinner, Sophie chattered about her work in interior design, about Julian's job as a project manager for a real estate firm in Charlotte. I listened, nodding, but deep inside, something sharp and uneasy stirred. He spoke smoothly, but his eyes never met mine. They darted to Sophie or lingered on his own watch. When I asked about family, Julian answered briefly, "My parents are often abroad on business. I'm an only child, so I've been independent from an early age." His words said one thing, but the evasive glances and brittle smile told another story. I hadn't planned to dig further, but one evening while grading papers, the soldier's instinct for vigilance stirred. I opened my old laptop and typed Julian Fairchild into the browser. Within minutes, I found a 6-year-old local article. 20-year-old Julian Fairchild detained for illegal gambling and disorderly conduct at a nightclub. The case had been dismissed with bail money and legal maneuvering, but that short article burned in my mind like a red warning flare. The next evening, I called Sophie into the living room. I didn't forbid or shout. I simply placed the printed article in front of her. She trembled as she held it, eyes wide with shock. "Dad, I didn't know." He never told me, I sighed, resting my hand on her shoulder. "Sophie, I'm not saying mistakes define a man forever, but you must know, stains from the past can resurface at any time. Take the time to truly understand him. Don't hand your heart and your life to someone you've only seen from the outside." Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. She promised to be cautious. Yet I knew my daughter, gentle and trusting, like her mother. Once in love, she always wanted to believe that love could change a man. On the day of our dinner meeting, I put on my only blue suit, the one I had worn to Sophie's college graduation. The fabric was faded, the shoulder seams worn, but as her father, I had to appear my best. The restaurant Julian chose was in downtown Charlotte, amid neon lights and bustling streets. The glass door reflected my image, an aging teacher with gray hair, shoes polished but still scratched. I took a deep breath, telling myself, "Patrick, as long as Sophie is happy, nothing else matters." Sophie clutched my hand as we entered, smiling with hopeful eyes. "You'll like him, Dad." "Just give him a chance." Julian was already seated, posture straight, wine swirling in his glass under golden light. He rose to greet us, smile precise, eyes flicking over me once with icy detachment. "Mr. Holloway, a pleasure. Sophie has told me so much about you." We sat. A waiter handed out, menace. Before I could read, Julian smiled with calculated charm. "They serve a very fine French foie gras here. I imagine you haven't tried it," before I folded the menu, replying calmly, "I usually eat simply, but tonight I'm not here for the food." Sophie quickly interjected, trying to soften the moment, but Julian chuckled, raising his glass. Of course, of course. Still, new experiences can broaden horizons. Throughout dinner, he paraded stories, $100 million projects, powerful contacts, just a phone call away. He wasn't conversing with me, he was performing for Sophie, using me as a silent audience. When I mentioned the old article, Julian froze for half a second. The smile lingered, but a flash of cold steel crossed his eyes. He sipped slowly, then set his glass down with deliberate weight. "Oh, that. Just youthful recklessness. Who hasn't made mistakes? What matters is who I am now. Smart people don't dwell on the past. They focus on what a man is building." His tone was smooth, but his gaze at me was sharp, resentful. Dinner carried on, but the atmosphere shifted. Julian ordered an expensive Italian wine, his voice emphasizing, "Rare stuff, usually not on a schoolteacher's table." He smirked. Sophie forced a laugh, and I clenched my napkin tighter. When the bill arrived, I reached for my card, but Julian snatched it first. He scanned the total, lips curling, then placed the slip in the center of the table. His smile was half courtesy, half mockery. I wouldn't want my future father-in-law feeling burdened. In places like this, he glanced around the lavish setting, "It's usually my role to pay." Sophie blushed, sneaking a worried glance at me, as if afraid my pride had been wounded. I said nothing, pressing my lips shut. Julian laid down his card smoothly, then looked back with a smirk. "Next time, let's choose somewhere simpler. A place that suits your taste and habits." His voice dripped honey, but each word cut like a fine blade, leaving only the bitter sting of disdain. Outside, Charlotte's night air was cool. Sophie looped her arm through mine, smiling nervously. "See, Dad? He's not as bad as you thought." I smiled faintly, but inside, suspicion hardened into stone. I had taught hundreds of students, survived battlefields, and my instincts told me Julian Fairchild was no harmless suitor with a blemished past. He was a storm brewing on the horizon. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. His gaze at the restaurant lingered like a knife at my back, not the gaze of a man seeking a father's approval, but of someone who saw me as an obstacle. 30 years in classrooms had taught me to read faces. I could tell the difference between remorse and calculation. Julian Fairchild was no penitent man. One afternoon, after grading papers, I stopped by my old university library, where friends still worked in the law research department. I asked for help pulling public records. Within an hour, I had several documents in hand. A 2019 civil lawsuit. Julian sued by his former company for breach of contract and misuse of investment funds. Settled out of court for a large sum. A Charlotte police report. Julian was detained after a bar fight tied to gambling debts. Anonymous forum posts in the real estate community. Accusations of using project money in circles, cheating small investors. The papers trembled in my hand, not from fear, but anger. Anger that my kind-hearted daughter was about to bind her life to such a man. That night, I invited Sophie over. She sat on the old sofa as I laid the file before her. "Sophie, I won't dictate your choices, but you need to see this." She read page after page, eyes wide, hands shaking. "This can't be true. Julian told me he only had one youthful mistake. How could there be more?" I interrupted gently but firmly. "My child, I won't deny your right to happiness, But as your father, I must show you the truth. You must know who the man you're about to marry truly is, and what he's capable of." Sophie buried her face, sobbing. I held her tight, my heart aching. I knew her love for Julian wouldn't break easily, even with the truth in front of her. A week later, Julian appeared at my door. He knocked with a faint smile, holding a bottle of red wine. "Mr. Holloway, I think it's time we had a private conversation." His eyes no longer carried even a pretense of humility, only the chill of a man who knew I had touched his secrets. That night, wind from the Blue Ridge whistled through the gaps in my old cabin. I sat at my desk, stacks of ungraded papers around me, when pounding rattled the door. Urgent, impatient, I rose. My soldier's instinct made me pause a moment before opening. When I did, Julian Fairchild stood there, bottle of Italian wine in hand, smirk curling his lips as if this were just a friendly visit. "Mr. Holloway," he said smoothly, "I think it's time for a talk. Not about Sophie, but between two men." I stepped aside, motioning him in. Under the warm yellow light of the living room, he looked even more out of place. Italian leather jacket, gleaming gold watch, polished shoes, everything clashing against my old bookshelves and the family photos lining the wall. Julian set the wine bottle on the table as if bestowing a favor, then sank into the armchair, legs crossed, lounging back. His gaze drifted around the room, skimming each keepsake: Sophie's graduation photo, my students' awards, the scuffed guitar I still strum on rare, quiet afternoons. In those eyes I saw a contempt he barely bothered to hide. "I hear," he began in a low voice, "you've been revisiting a few things from my past with Sophie. Some lawsuits, a couple of articles, is that right?" I didn't deny it. A father has a duty to warn his daughter. I didn't tell her to leave you. I told her she should know the truth before making a choice. Julian let out a small laugh, as brittle as clinking glass. "The truth? Mr. Holloway, what is truth? We all have a past. Have you never made mistakes? Do you want the world to judge you by the worst stretch of your life forever?" I met his eyes, voice firm. "Youth errs, but a grown man learns to take responsibility. And if you truly love my daughter, you don't need to hide. You only need to prove you've changed." He tilted his head, the smile still pasted on, but his eyes shifted. Sharp, cold, threaded with barely checked hatred. "You know, teacher," he stressed the word like a sneer, "you're stepping into a game you can't win. Sophie trusts me. My friends move in circles you'll never reach. And you're just a middling school teacher in this creaky cabin. Who's going to believe you over me?" The air went tight as a drawn string. I said nothing, only looked at him with the eyes of a father who has crossed battlefields and kept walking with death at his shoulder. Julian leaned back, the silk returning to his voice. "Mr. Holloway, I didn't come to start a fight. I came to make one thing clear. If you keep digging up old dirt, keep planting doubts in Sophie's head, you will lose your daughter. I'll make her believe you're just a jealous, bitter old man. And believe me," he leaned in and whispered, "I'm very good at making people believe what I want." He stood, straightened his collar, and set the bottle on the table, like a period at the end of a sentence. "Enjoy the wine. Think of it as a gift. Next time, I may not be this polite." The door shut behind him, leaving the room in stillness. I sat, knuckles white from the grip of my hand. Outside, wind howled through the trees, but inside me a greater storm gathered. From now on, this wasn't just about feelings. This was a war. In the days after that visit, Sophie changed. She still called, asked after me, but something strained her voice, as if each word had been weighed beneath someone else's gaze. One evening, an unexpected call. Sophie's voice trembled as though hiding something. "Dad, can I come by?" Half an hour later, she stood at my door, face pale. I brewed 2 cups of tea and set them down. She sat quietly, turning the diamond ring on her finger. "Dad," she began, "Julian says, you told me about his old lawsuits." How did you find out? I looked her in the eye. Public records, nothing secret. And I didn't make anything up, Sophie. I showed you facts so you'd know who you were walking beside. She bit her lip, hesitating. He says, everyone has a past. You were a soldier. You must know everyone makes mistakes when they're young. I nodded slowly. Yes, but the difference is this. Some people repair. Some people conceal and repeat. I'm not forbidding you, but I want you to look closely. A man can build a whole castle out of promises, but a single act can expose the truth. Sophie was silent for a long time. Then she whispered, Julian says you're jealous, that you don't want me to have a better life than you. Is that true? My heart clenched. I reached for her hand. My girl, I've stood at a chalkboard my whole life on a modest salary. I've never envied the rich. The only thing I fear is you putting your trust in the wrong place. I'd rather be misunderstood, even blamed by you, than watch you fall into a pit. Her eyes reddened, but she said nothing more. She rose, wrapped her coat around her, and stepped to the door. Before leaving, she paused, a beat. Dad, maybe. You're right. But I need to know for myself. The door closed, and the room filled with the smell of cooling tea. I sat there, hollow. I understood. Sophie was now suspended between two worlds. One was sweet love laced with traps. The other was her faith in me, eroding day by day under Julian's poisonous whispers. Outside, night swallowed the mountains. I looked up at my late wife's picture on the wall and murmured, Maria, give our girl strength. I fear the real storm still lies ahead. In the weeks that followed, I felt the distance grow. Sophie still called and texted, but she no longer told me the small details of her day. Every conversation carried Julian's shadow, as if my words had to pass through his filter. One afternoon, while I was grading, an old colleague phoned. Patrick, are you all right? Susan's voice was thick with concern. I frowned. What's happened? I was at a fundraiser. Julian was there. He talked a lot about you. Said you resented your daughter marrying Rich and were smearing him. People turned to me. Wanting confirmation, I went still. Julian had moved beyond private manipulation. He was bending truth in rooms I couldn't reach. Rumors spread faster than I imagined. Students whispered. Parents eyed me curiously. I caught snatches. Maybe Mr. Holloway can't stand his daughter marrying up. Meanwhile, Sophie faced pressure too. One night, she came by, eyes rimmed red. Dad, my friends say you're trying to wreck things because you don't like Julian. They say you don't want me happy. Did you really tell people terrible things about him? I sat straighter, voice firm. I've never smeared anyone. What I had to say, I said to you. But someone is trying to turn me into the villain to pull you away. She said nothing, but doubt lingered in her eyes. I knew she wanted to believe me, yet the weight of whispers was tilting her. Julian, for his part, grew bolder. He took Sophie to glittering parties where his friends sniped openly. Oh, you're Mr. Holloway's daughter? How quaint. Julian's told us so much. He must be terribly strict, Each quip was a pinprick in Sophie's pride. She smiled thinly, and I knew her heart was cracking. One day she called, voice breaking, Dad, how did love turn into a battlefield? I answered slowly, steadily. Real love never needs to slander or divide to survive. If lies are required to keep you, it isn't love anymore. The call ended, leaving a heavy silence. I sat in the dark, listening to the clock's measured beats. I knew Julian was playing a long game, slicing the cord between me and Sophie, thread by thread. But he had forgotten this. I've spent a lifetime teaching students to find truth behind numbers. This time, I would teach him one last lesson about truth in life. I've never believed in petty tricks, but when Julian unleashed rumors, casting me as the jealous father, I understood. Only truth could shatter the lie. At first, I meant only to shield myself. Then I heard Sophie's strangled sobs over the phone, and my heart clenched. No, I would shield her from the velvet net he was weaving. I began by contacting a former student, now a reporter at the local paper. I handed over printed civil filings and police reports I'd pulled. "I don't want to take down," I said, "but if the day comes, help me verify." No one will be able to dismiss this as a bitter old teacher's invention. Next, I met an old friend in the county police. We sat in a small cafe while he slid a few worn files across the table. "Patrick, you sure you want to stir this up? Julian has money and lawyers. It won't be easy. I'm not out to destroy anyone," I said steady. "I want the truth to stand. If he's truly changed, this evidence harms nothing. If he hasn't, I won't watch my daughter step into a trap." Piece by piece, the picture sharpened. Gambling debts still unpaid. Quiet settlements to dodge scandal. An investment contract he signed, then abandoned at the last minute, leaving dozens with nothing. I knew my words alone wouldn't cut through. Sophie was wrapped in honeyed promises. So I would let truth speak for itself, in front of a crowd, at a moment Julian could not deny. One evening, as I was sorting through files, my phone buzzed. It was Sophie. "Dad, Julian says you've been secretly investigating him. Is that true?" I drew a deep breath before answering. "Yes, not out of hatred, but out of love, because I promised your mother, even after she was gone, that I would protect you from anyone who might cause you harm." On the other end, Sophie was silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "Dad, if one day I have to choose between love and truth, what do you think I should do?" I closed my eyes, my throat tight. "My daughter, true love never fears the truth. If it does, it isn't love." When the call ended, I looked at the stack of files on my desk, and a cold certainty filled me. I wasn't just protecting Sophie. I was preparing for a public battle, one where hundreds of eyes would watch the man who humiliated me stripped bare of his mask, and I knew that day was near. I once thought Julian would only scheme behind closed doors. I had underestimated him. Within 2 weeks, Sophie's friends' social media pages overflowed with pointed posts. Some fathers just can't let go, always meddling in their daughters' lives. "Sad when old men can't stop controlling things. Poor future bride beneath each," Julian's friends commented eagerly, piling on like a chorus. I didn't need to guess who orchestrated it. Then the relatives joined in. At Aunt Emma's dinner, I stepped in and immediately caught the whispers. "Heard Patrick doesn't like the groom because he's too rich." Someone said he even hired people to dig up Julian's past. Suspicious eyes turned on me. Even those once close kept their distance, as if afraid to be caught up in scandal. Julian arrived later at that same gathering, smile radiant, Sophie's hand in his. In front of everyone, he lifted his glass, voice carrying, "We all have parents." I respect Sophie's father, but it's sad when some people struggle to accept that their daughter is beginning a new life. I believe, in time, he'll come around. His words sounded patient, but everyone heard the blade in them. Eyes of pity and reproach fell on me, while Julian stood glowing in his role as the gracious son-in-law. On the drive home, Sophie sat silently in the passenger seat. I knew she was torn. I also knew Julian was using public opinion to force her hand. That night, I received an anonymous message with a link. A local forum post blazed with the title, "Jealous Father-in-Law Invents Lies to Split Up Young Love." Line by line, it twisted facts. I was painted as a bitter, penniless old man, unwilling to see his daughter happy, while Julian appeared the successful, generous man. By the last sentence, my blood boiled. Sometimes, the greatest enemy of happiness is family itself. I gripped my phone, chest heaving. Julian no longer wanted only to humiliate me at dinners or weddings. He wanted to erase the very image of me as a father in Sophie's eyes. But he forgot one thing. I don't fight with rumors. I fight with truth. And every piece of evidence I had gathered was waiting for the right moment to step into the light. After that post, the weight of scrutiny grew heavy. At the market, I overheard whispers. That's Holloway, the meddlesome father-in-law. Old acquaintances still nodded hello, but their eyes were different. I knew silence would mean Julian's victory, but I also knew a hasty denial would only make me look defensive. To turn the tide, I needed proof and timing. So I began taking small steps. At another family gathering at Aunt Emma's, I sat beside Ruth, Maria's sister, Sophie's beloved aunt. I lowered my voice and slid her a copy of the 2019 lawsuit. Ruth, you're Sophie's closest kin besides me. If the day comes when truth must be told, remember, I never fabricated, never tried to divide. I only want her to know who she is about to tie her life to. Ruth held the papers, her eyes heavy. She said little, only pressed her hand gently over mine, a silent promise. Next, I met John, my old brother-in-arms from the service. In his garage, between the smell of oil and sawdust, I lay out police records tied to Julian. John, you know me. I don't play dirty, but if the wedding day becomes a stage, I need someone to stand and verify the truth. John skimmed the files and sighed. Patrick, this punk isn't just arrogant. He's dangerous. You can count on me. When the time comes, I'll speak. Step by step, I built a quiet circle of witnesses. Neither Julian nor Sophie knew what I was doing, but I knew that when the truth emerged, I wouldn't stand alone. One evening, Sophie came by. She sat at the kitchen table, eyes heavy. Dad, Julian says you're rallying relatives and friends against him. Are you? I set down my spoon and held her gaze. I'm not pulling anyone to my side, Sophie. I'm giving them the truth. Whether they believe or not is their choice, and one day you'll face that choice too. Sophie stayed quiet, but her hands trembled. I knew a seed of doubt had sprouted. That night, alone in my study, I pulled out a wooden box. Inside lay my service tags, a badge, and a few old photos with brothers in arms. I whispered, Maria, I'm going to war again. But this time, the battlefield is our own home, and I won't retreat. Sunday morning, the town church was crowded. I kept my old habit, arriving early, sitting in the third row, praying quietly under stained glass. But that day I felt eyes on me, whispers threading through hymns. After the service, before the pastor could even step down, Julian strode up front, elegant in a pale gray suit, a white carnation on his lapel. He smiled warmly at the crowd, voice ringing, Brothers and sisters, I want to share something, because I believe in transparency in family. I sat frozen. Julian never missed a chance to turn a shared stage into his personal spotlight. There are those, he continued, his eyes sweeping straight at me, who cannot accept when their daughter grows up and finds happiness. Instead of trusting, they dig up the past, fabricate stories, sow doubt. I am saddened that this person happens to be my future father-in-law. The sound fell into silence. Many turned their heads toward me. I heard Mrs. Miller behind me sigh clearly. Poor bride. Julian lowered his voice, as if sharing heartfelt thoughts. I have forgiven, because I understand he might be overly worried. But I think it is time everyone knows the truth. Mr. Holloway does not want his daughter to step into a better life. He wants to keep Sophie under his control so that no one can surpass his shadow. A few whispers, nods of agreement. I saw Sophie in the back row, her face pale, eyes brimming with tears. She wanted to stand up, but Julian quickly turned, holding her hand high like a gesture of victory. We will marry, despite this objection, he declared, because love cannot be imprisoned by jealousy or selfishness. The church erupted with scattered applause, mixed with doubtful murmurs. I sat still, my fingers gripping the wooden pew so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I knew that at this moment any word I said would only make me seem like I was desperately defending myself. But Julian did not stop. 2 days later, a long post appeared on Facebook from his account, with a photo of me secretly taken at the church. When a father no longer knows his limits, His daughter's love becomes the victim. The post spread rapidly. In the comments, his friends chimed in, mocking, "A poor teacher should just retire and let his daughter live a luxurious life. Poor bride, caught between happiness and her jealous father." One afternoon, as I went to the post office to send mail, an old acquaintance, Mr. Harris, approached. He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Patrick, is it true? You are making things up to ruin your daughter's marriage?" I looked straight into his eyes calmly. "If the day comes when the truth is revealed, you will understand. I do not need to explain. I only need time." But when I returned to the wooden house, I sat down, feeling as if the whole world was turning its back. I looked at Maria's photo on the wall, my voice choking. "My dear, they think I am selfish. They believe his words, but I will not back down. If I must lose all my honor for our daughter to escape, I will accept it." In the silence, I suddenly understood. Julian had just pushed everything to the highest level. He wanted to disgrace me publicly, to turn me into a failure in front of the whole town. But because of that, he had no idea he had stepped right into the trap I had been quietly setting. The wedding day came, and the sky was unusually clear. The villa by the Blue Ridge Mountains was dressed in pure white, roses covering the walkway, and champagne stacked into crystal towers. The entire town seemed to be there. Sophie's old friends, Julian's colleagues, even a few local reporters. I walked in, no longer in the old green suit like before, but in a gray suit freshly tailored. A few eyes glanced back, some pitying, some contemptuous. I heard someone whisper, "He still dares to show up?" I only tightened the strap of the old brown leather briefcase in my hand. The ceremony began. Sophie in her white gown, radiant like an angel, her eyes swollen red. I knew she had not slept peacefully in recent nights. Julian stood beside her, confident smile, triumphant gaze, as if he had silenced all storms with social media and sweet words. When the pastor raised the question, "Does anyone object to this marriage?" the courtyard fell utterly silent. I stood up. My voice rang clear, unwavering. "I object." Murmurs burst forth. Julian whipped around, sparks in his eyes. "What stunt are you pulling now, old man?" I stepped forward and placed the leather briefcase on the table by the pulpit. From it, I drew a thin folder, only the key documents verified with seals. I did not boast, nor did I need many words. "I have remained silent all this time," I said calmly, "because I wanted my daughter to choose for herself. But today I cannot allow this marriage to be built on a lie." I raised a police record. In the year 2019, Julian Fairchild was arrested for financial fraud, arranging to escape prison. Here is the certification. Then I showed an abandoned investment contract. And here is proof he once withdrew, leaving dozens of families with nothing of their savings. Phones clicked, cameras flashing, whispers spread like wind. Sophie's face turned pale, her shoulders trembling. Julian flushed red. That was the past. He is making this up. I have changed. John, my fellow veteran friend, rose from his seat. His voice thundered. "I confirm. The documents are verified. Nothing here is fabricated." Ruth, Maria's sister, also stood, her eyes stern. "I saw the papers myself. Patrick is not lying. He is only protecting his daughter." The tide of eyes shifted, from suspicion to outrage, but not at me. Sophie burst into tears, turned to Julian. "You said it was all behind. You said you were different." Julian stammered. "Sophie, listen to me. I did it for us." She pulled her hand away and rushed to embrace me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I doubted you." I squeezed her shoulder gently, whispering, "I was never angry. I only wanted you safe." Julian stood frozen, camera flashes striking like lightning, making him look like a man at an invisible trial. Suddenly, a deep voice rang from the front row. "Enough." No one spoke further. Even the wind in the garden seemed to pause. Mr. Richard Fairchild, Julian's father, rose with his cane. His face was lined with hardship, his eyes heavy. Slowly he spoke, each word striking like stone. I recognized Mr. Patrick Holloway from the first time. He is the man who saved my life in Iraq. Without him, I would not be alive to stand here today, and there would be no son named Julian. The murmurs ceased instantly. Julian spun toward his father, his face drained of blood. Richard looked him straight in the eyes. I stayed silent to protect you. I hoped you could change, but my conscience will not let me continue. You have disgraced the very man who saved your father's life. You owe him an apology, right here. He struck his cane on the floor with a sharp thud. If you have any shred of honor left, kneel and beg forgiveness. Otherwise, from this moment, the word traitor will follow you forever. Some people jumped to their feet, clapping. Faces once hesitant now showed clarity and judgment. Sophie clung to me, sobbing. Julian, his legs trembling, his eyes frantic. He had lost all ground. The pastor closed the Bible, voice heavy. This wedding cannot continue. I led Sophie out to the steps. The afternoon sun stretched across the stone, and the mountain wind blew sharp as a blade cutting away the falsehood. In that moment, I knew honor had returned to its rightful place, and my daughter had escaped a gilded cage. From that day, Julian no longer had any mask to hide behind. The law and public opinion were the only doors left open before him, and I, a father, a veteran, a teacher, had finally kept my promise to Maria, to protect Sophie at all costs. That day, a lavish wedding had turned into a public trial. Julian lost everything, honor, future, and even the love he once arrogantly thought he controlled. And I, a father humiliated at his own daughter's wedding, had reclaimed my dignity, regained Sophie's trust, and most importantly, fulfilled the promise to my late wife. Justice may come late, but when it arrives, it unmasks the wicked and returns a voice to those who were trampled. Before I end, I want to ask you, if it were you, would you have the courage to stand before hundreds of people to stop a wrong marriage, as I did? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel to continue with me, hearing stories many wish to hide. Your support is the motivation for me to keep telling them.